नमस्कार और स्वागत है आपका चेतन भारत लर्निंग में। और इस क्लास में हम करेंगे करंट अफेयर्स इंटरनेशनल रिलेशन से जुड़े हुए 27 जनवरी से लेकर 2 फरवरी तक। ऑलराइट, तो कुछ इंटरेस्टिंग डेवलपमेंट्स हुई हैं पिछले हफ्ते में। फॉर एग्जांपल चाइना और ताइवान के जो रिलेशंस हैं वो काफ़ी एक्सेसिवली डिटेरियोरेट किए हैं। उसके बाद इंडिया और बांग्लादेश को 50 साल हो गए हैं फॉर्मल रिलेशनशिप्स इस्टेब्लिश किए हुए, तो हम उसके बारे में थोड़ा जानने की कोशिश करेंगे। फिर एक रीसेंट डेवलपमेंट है, म्यांमार में कू हुआ है, हमारा नेबर है, बहुत बड़ी बाउंड्री लाइन है। We're not going to cover that in as much detail because it's still a developing situation, and most of the commentators who are sort of writing these op-eds अभी regular हिंदू और एक्सप्रेस में op-eds नहीं है, जो बाकी के op-eds लिखे जा रहे हैं उसमें there's not much information they're providing. It's mostly it's speculation about speculation. All right, so we're not going to go there for now. We're going to try and understand what's at stake for India. All right, so the first issue that we're going to cover is China-Taiwan relations. So what's happening is that this here is the idea, right? So the geographical proximity between Taiwan and China renders it one of the most important relationships in South Asia, in South China Sea, all right? So you could see this is Taiwan and this is China, all right? So what had happened was that warplanes from China sort of entered into Taiwanese airspace. And once they entered into Taiwanese airspace, there was some alarm bells that rang across the world, and Taiwan had to activate its air defenses, and United States had to make comments about its steadfast support for Taiwan against China, and all of that happened, right? So what's the drama here? So I've spoken to some people, and what I've realized is that they look at these incursions by China and periodic flare-ups in China Taiwan relationships as isolated incidents, all right? कोई भी इस हिस्ट्री को पीस टुगेदर नहीं कर पाता है, राइट? कोई ये इसका हिस्टोरिकल जो कॉन्टेक्स्ट है, इसका जियोपॉलिटिकल कॉन्टेक्स्ट है, वो समझना बहुत ज़रूरी है. ओनली देन यू कुड रियली अंडरस्टैंड व्हाट्स हैपनिंग, राइट? सो वी डिसाइडेड टू रेमेडी दैट प्रॉब्लम एंड वी गोना गो इनटू द हिस्टोरिकल एस्पेक्ट ऑफ दिस, ऑलराइट? So what happened was that the first known settlers in Taiwan actually were Austronesian people. The first record in China, the first record of Taiwan in China is actually not that old as you would think of it. It's actually 3rd century AD. But even that record, right, from ancient China, is used by Chinese scholars to sort of establish their claim upon Taiwan. All right. Then what happened was that. Because after this record, what happened was that in the medieval period, the Dutch occupied the island for 40 years, and then it went back to the Qing dynasty, and the Qing dynasty of China sort of held on to Taiwan till 1895, and it's only in very recent modern times that Taiwan sort of fell out of favor with China, all right? So then what happened was that in the 17th century, and this is demographically very important, a lot of migrants from Guangdong and Fujian provinces of China started flooding Taiwan, all right? And actually even today this is the mix that pretty much dominates Taiwanese politics, all right? So the two people were Hokklo Chinese and Hakka Chinese, all right? So this is the demographic makeup of Taiwan, right? And it's the descendants of these two groups that pretty much make up Taiwan's current population, all right? So in 1895, what happened was that Japan won over China in the first Japan-Sino war, and the Qing government at that time, the Qing dynasty at that time, had to cede Taiwan to Japan, all right? So it remained within Japan's control for a very long time. But after Second World War, what happened was that the Republic of Taiwan, which was one of the victors at that time, began ruling Taiwan with the consent of its allies such as the UK and US, right? And Japan surrendered and sort of relinquished control over the territory. But then, like in the next few years, what happened was that a civil war broke out in China, all right? Then this is the main guy, right? This guy here is like has been the Taiwanese history is very deterministic towards this guy, right? It's almost as if everything is moving towards his coming to power in Taiwan, right? So this guy is Chiang Kai-shek. He is very important in Asian history, right? So then what happened was that Chiang Kai-shek at that time was beaten back by Mao Zedong, and he had to retreat, all right? He had to take his Kuomintang government back to Taiwan, or actually to Taiwan in 1949, right? So this group was referred to as the mainland Chinese group. They made up 1.5 million people and dominated Taiwan's politics for a for a big chunk of time, and 14% of the population of Taiwan comes from the Kuomintang people. All right, so then he sort of then his son sort of inherited this very grave authoritarian rule, and people were very resentful towards them because it was this sort of minority dictating over or lording over Taiwanese population. A big chunk of those populations were actually ethnically Chinese, right? So Chiang's son, right, Chiang Ching-kuo, he started allowing a process of democratization in Taiwan, which eventually led to the 2000 election of the island's first non-KMT president, Chen Shui-bian, right? Chen Shui-bian is this person who really flips things around, right? He's the guy, right? Chen Shui-bian is the person who's openly pro-independence, right? He just says we are going to get independent, because before Chen Shui-bian, independence was not on the card. It was like we'd like to maintain whatever weird relationship we have with China up till now. But then after Chen Shui-bian, it became an open secret that Taiwan is acting towards independence, right? So where are things now? You need to sort of start from 1980s, right? So up till 1980, the relationship between China and Taiwan was actually pretty vexed. But in 1980, what happened was that the Taiwanese started opening up to China, right? And Taiwan was actually a much better economy in the 1980s, right? It was this hub of manufacturing that China was not. That China was only like what was in China at very embryonic stage at that time, right? So at that time, when the opening up started between these two countries, China sort of offered a one country, two systems formula to Taiwan. Something along the similar lines is that as the situation in Hong Kong, right? So this is what was offered, or Macau, right? So this system was established in Hong Kong. To be the system that was established in Hong Kong was the showcase to Taiwan. Like they were told, like this is the sort of system that we want. However, Taiwan sort of did not agree with that, right? Taiwan was not happy with that. Even though it rejected China's offer, it relaxed rules on visits and investment in China, right? So there's still a lot of investment, a lot of Taiwanese money that is spent in China, right, through investment. A lot of the big business owners in China, right, people who actually lord over the corporate structure of China, are actually Taiwanese in origin, right? Then this sort of money that led to some peace, right? So there's this theory in international relations of how when economics or when two countries start trading with each other and there is insane amount of interdependency between the two economies, they are more likely than not to avert war, right? They're likely to say, like, let's cooperate with each other, lower the transaction costs, and then let's not make war, right? So that's the idea. It actually failed in the First World War, and E.H. Carr wrote an entire book about it. But that was the philosophy that was driving Taiwan and China relations for a very long time, right? Because we trade so much, because there is so much investment going both ways, we are not going to go to war, right? But China, it turns out, was sort of using that as a pretext to establish codependence and enable its claim over Taiwan, right? So in 1991, Taiwan sort of declared that our war with China is over, right? It was just a formal declaration of sorts, not very meaningful, but it was meaningful in a symbolic way, right? Because the Taiwan-Chinese war, the Kuomintang and Communist Party war, had been going on for a very long time. But in 1991, they said, okay, we're not fighting with China anymore, right? And then there were also limited talks between two sides, unofficial representatives on how to sort of deal with the situation, how to sort of integrate. But then the Chinese government just refused to recognize Taiwan's government as legitimate. And that's why there was no government to government contact, all right? So Beijing was sort of alarmed, as I told you, in 2000 when Chen Shui-bian became like the president of Taiwan, and he openly went for independence, all right? Then Chen Shui-bian was re-elected in 2004, which prompted China to pass this anti-secession law. This anti-secession law sort of allowed China to use what it called these non-peaceful means against Taiwan if it tries to secede, right? So you could see the Chinese intent from from the very beginning, right? They are they can attack, right? That's what they're saying. We can do whatever we want, and like you just cannot go into an independent direction. So you can see how China has to sort of take account of an evolving situation in Taiwan, right? Depending on who is the president there, it has to sort of mend its ways, right? So now China is on the verge of like getting sick of it. Then what happened was in 2008 there was a more moderate person who got elected. It was Ma Ying-jeou, right? He sought to improve relations with China mainly through economic agreements. So that philosophy of like trading into peace sort of like was again put into effect in 2018, right? But then what happened, like the most ground shifting development happened in January 2016, right? When this woman, right, Tsai Ing-wen, this woman is the most important person in South China Sea right now, right, in that region. So Tsai Ing-wen she got elected in 2016 and openly declared that what she wants is eventual official independence from China, right? So she leads what's called the Democratic Progressive Party. This is the first time a non-KMT party has sort of come into power. It's a fresh breath. Like a splash of fresh air in Taiwanese politics, right? And like whenever you open a video or a documentary or a news report about China-Taiwan relations, it's her at the center of it, all right? So then what happened was that Donald Trump became president in 2016 alongside her, right? So breaking protocol, what they did was that they spoke to each other, right, over phone, and they declared the transcripts, like they sort of came out with the transcripts of their conversation also. And Donald Trump sort of assured her that you have all our support, right? This was the first time since 1979, right, that this has happened, right? So despite the lack of formal relations, United States and Taiwan don't have formal relations, and I'm going to tell you why. United States has an agreement to supply Taiwan with defensive weaponry, and like in case of an attack by China, it repeatedly keeps saying that it would be a grave concern and we would also have to act. So United States has said so, that like if you attack Taiwan, we'd have to sort of jump in, right? So the cards are on the table, right? And then throughout 2018, what happened was China sort of started forcing companies to show maps on its websites correctly. So what it deemed correct, right? So what it said was you have to show Taiwan as part of China on your website, like whenever you show the world maps, right? There was this news, there was this beautiful piece about how China burned 2,000 maps in its country, which did not show Taiwan as its own part or Arunachal as its own part, right? So and then like it sort of threatened to block and sanction these companies if they fail to comply, right? So it's using its economic heft to advance territorial claims, right? So in 2020, Miss Tsai won won a second term, right? She became the president again, and that really revolted the Chinese, right? That really sparked, alarmed, like that did whatever it could in China, right? And at the same time, when China was sort of trying to offer a one country, two systems model to Taiwan, things in Hong Kong became interesting, right? Hong Kong people just said like, we are not interested in this. The increasing Chinese influence in Hong Kong and the complete disregard for democratic establishment in Hong Kong is a serious concern, right? So sort of Taiwan knew that like we can't be a part of the Chinese system in this way, right? And then in September, what happened was September of 2020, Washington sent its high-ranking politicians to hold meetings on the island, right? And this was a meeting for the decades, all right? It happened after a very long time. So more like Assistant Secretary of State and officials of that order were in Taiwan. And while they were in Taiwan, China conducted live wire exercises in Taiwan Strait to sort of put on display their displeasure at Americans in Taiwan, right? So this happened. Now then, like what happens now, right? So Joe Biden comes to power, like he's in power now, right? So he has said that like our commitment to Taiwan it's his administration that has said that our commitment to Taiwan is rock solid, right? And in the first few days of his presidency, and this is supposed to be the first major international crisis that he's bound to face, right? So there was this large incursion by Chinese warplanes over the 2 days, right? And the Taiwanese Air Force moved and like sort of warned China away, right? And John Kirby, who's the Pentagon spokesperson right now, he said, we have obligations to assist Taiwan with their self-defense, and I think you're going to see that continue. So he said, we are going to defend Taiwan, whatever may come. All right. But then, like, the crucial question remains, right? What the hell is Taiwan, right? What is its status in international community, right? So there's disagreement and confusion, and precisely because there is disagreement and confusion, can both states sort of coexist, right? It's because of this manufactured confusion that there is amity, between some level of amity, right? This confusion is enabling Taiwan to exist, actually, right? So China regards Taiwan as a breakaway province, right? Which it has vowed to retake by force if necessary, right? So their stand is clear. This is a breakaway province. We're going to take it back, and this is ours, right? But Taiwanese leaders already, like, obviously say that we're much more than a province, right? We're a sovereign state, because you see, it has its own constitution. It has a democratically elected government. It has 300,000 active troops in its armed forces. Now that doesn't look like a breakaway province, does it? It has, there are four elements of a state, and it has three, like, logged in, right? It just doesn't have, like, international recognition, right? That's all it lacks. And recognition also is pretty much provided if American diplomats are coming to your area and sort of conducting these important meetings, right? So recognition short, they're a state, they're a sovereign entity, right? Then Chiang Kai-shek's Republic of China, the government, the ROC government, it sort of first actually said that we are China. They are not China. China is not China. Taiwan is China, right? That was their initial stand, right? And that is why it held China's seat on the United Nations Security Council, and was actually recognized by most Western nations, and only China, like, as the only Chinese government, right? So most Western nations actually said Taiwan is China, right? And they had a seat in the United Nations Security Council also, right? So you could understand. Then what happened was, in 1971, United Nations Security Council, so Henry Kissinger sort of visited China and spoke to him, and there was this trilateral thing, right? Pakistan, United States, and China, and they made up and they decided, now we are friends. So China was given the seat, and diplomatic recognition was given to Beijing, and the ROC government was forced out of United Nations Security Council. Now, since then, a number of countries that recognize the ROC government in Taiwan diplomatically has fallen. So the number of governments is now, like, only 15 that grant recognition to Taiwan, all right? And because of this huge divide between the two positions, that it is a state and it is not a state, right? There's no middle ground there, right? So that's why the legal status of Taiwan remains uncertain. But what you should absorb is that this uncertainty in legal status is important, all right? It's critical, because that is what allows Taiwan to sort of maneuver around, right? It would want, so let's say Taiwan tomorrow gets recognition from the world, then we are bound to see a war in the Formosa Strait, right? So that. But then, like, China and Taiwan have sort of, like, really gelled with each other also, right? So the conflict is only one part of the story. There is a lot of cooperation also happening, right? So for example, Taiwanese companies have invested $40 billion in China, all right? And, like, as I've told you, like, there are some very senior Taiwanese people who are business tycoons in China, right? So, like, there was this controversial trade agreement in 2014 that sparked this movement called the Sunflower Movement, where students and activists sort of occupied Taiwan's parliament, protesting against what they saw China's growing influence in Taiwan, all right? Then, like, let's come to India, right? How does it impact India? And that is where, like, you need to be very careful, right? So there were these tweets. So what happened was, like, last year, when there were elements from Taiwanese media sort of came in India's support when India and China were facing off at the border. What happened was that Indian media started reporting on Taiwan, and then the Chinese embassy released this beautiful little document asking Indian media to report on China a certain way, right? Saying that, like, you need to report on Taiwan as being an essential part of China and everything, right? And the Indian media said, like, we don't care, right? So this was actually then labeled as the Milk Tea Alliance, right? So India and Taiwan are looked upon as these Milk Tea Alliance countries, right? However, there is more to that than the symbolic part of it, right? The idea is that in the backdrop of our conflict with China, this alliance becomes even more important, right? And how could you gauge that our alliance with Taiwan is important, or, like, our relationship with Taiwan is significant? Is because Gorang Lal Das, right, who's a very senior diplomat who's been assigned there, right? So he is now He is now the new envoy to Taiwan, and is like seen, like his appointment is sort of seen as the importance of Taiwan. Like he sort of encapsulates the importance of Taiwan for India's diplomatic efforts there, right? So what is the strategic perspective out here? So yeah, so generally it's not just like the Indian, the Twitterverse in India and the Twitterverse in Taiwan sort of get together and have a Twitter party and that's it. No, there's very significant strategic and economic backing for this. There's an argument to be made. There is a very strong argument, and there's a strategic argument. For example, we have an Act East policy, and Taiwan has this new southbound policy, and it's a very important policy, right? So the southbound policy is how they sort of project. They want to project power in the southern region, right? So there are some Indian students who have to visit Taiwan and sort of understand their culture and study there. Like it's part of the new southbound policy, right? So the AEP, or our Act East policy, promises to strengthen strategic, economic, and diplomatic interactions in Southeast Asia and the Asia Pacific. All right. So we want to expand there. And the NSP, or the new southbound policy, aims to enhance cooperation and exchange between Taiwan and 18 countries in the Southeast Asia, South Asia, and Australasia, right? So you could see Taiwan sort of projecting its heft downwards, and India trying to project its heft eastwards, right? So there is this mail that is going to happen, all right? So both policies sort of fit each other like a jigsaw puzzle, or and it's very important, right? This is the strategic perspective in which both countries are operative, and the best manifestation. And the second thing is that there is a liberal democratic order sort of getting up to contain China, right? The best manifestation of that liberal democratic order right now is the Quad, right? India, Australia, Japan, and United States teaming up, which is almost a semi-alliance right now, right? They're conducting military exercises and whatnot. So Taiwan is like also fits there. It's a dovetail joint situation, right? We want Taiwan to be a part of it. Why? Because they're a liberal democratic entity, right? And they also want to contain China, right? So that, right? And then Taiwan is situated like it's a geographically significant position, right? It's very close to China. It can be like this sort of a floating warship right next to China, right? The term was used for Sri Lanka by Menon, right? By our previous national security advisor, but that could be also applied to Taiwan, right? So this Taiwan card idea has been floating for a very long time, right? If China sort of starts intruding into our airspace and our land and all of that, then there is an argument to be made that we could use the Taiwan card, right? Which we have not shied away from, right? Then there is an economic perspective to it, right? We are seeking what is called self-reliance, right? We want to ensure that there is an ample amount of manufacturing heft in India, right? We want to manufacture most things in our country itself, right? And Taiwan is also looking for economic partners outside its region, right? It is this global leader in like manufacture. There are a lot of companies that we sort of are familiar with, which are actually Taiwanese. Go look that up, right? We are flooded with Taiwanese brands around us, right? So it's really a leading power in science and technology and a semiconductor manufacturer, right? Though then what happened was when we banned Chinese apps, right? It was announced just this big step that we took, and it was sort of a big step. Then Taiwan, it sort of opened gates for Taiwan to actually mark its official entry into the Indian market, right? So there is this economic gelling also that is part of it, right? So then like that's the scene, right? We have a GDP that's sort of declining, and it's an issue. However, now we have a V-shaped recovery in progress according to the economic survey. But like even if that V-shaped recovery is a reality, even then we would need Taiwan to help us out economically, right? So Taiwan is thus seen as an alternative, reliable partner for India's consumer and business needs, right? So that the point that I'm trying to make here is that Taiwan, it's not just that like because India and China have a standoff, so we sort of like just start shouting Taiwan, Taiwan, and Taiwan does the same. There are strategic and economic reasons or geo-economic reasons for why we should engage with Taiwan more often, right? So what's the future for India-Taiwan relationship, right? So the first and foremost is the fact that it's very episodic. So whenever there is a tension between India and China, we go towards Taiwan, and as soon as the tension is resolved, we forget Taiwan, which is sort of reciprocal. There is reciprocal also, right? So that needs to like stop. Like we need to think of it on a more stationary basis, right? Then there are no signs in Taiwan that the Tsai government is seeking to build any formal relationship with India, right? We don't have an ambassador in Taiwan. We have an envoy in Taiwan, right? So there is no formal relationship established. And for Taiwan right now, cross-strait stability, right? Stability with China, like ensuring that there is no hostile conflict in the strait. That is more important, because as soon as India recognizes Taiwan, there are going to be sparks flying around in Asia, right? So even though like from 2010 onwards, no joint statement that has been issued between India and China has spoken of the one China policy. We don't recognize it. It seems that we've fallen out of the one China policy, right? We don't have one, although there was one like earlier. Now, so we are open to like doing whatever we want with Taiwan, right? So that has been one of the scenes around, but we need to be very careful, right? Because as soon as we start increasing our engagement with Taiwan, China will retort, right? China will do stuff. And that's why India and Taiwan both know like what are the limits and constraints here, because they also need to economically engage with China at the same time, right? That economic interdependence has been weaponized all of a sudden, right? The old IR theories of how economic interdependence leads to peace or trading peace does not work, right? The economic interdependence is more weaponized than ever, right? So we need to engage with Taiwan also, right? We engage with China, both of us. So we need to ensure it's going to be a very careful partnership if it is one, right? So what exactly could we do? First and foremost, we could actually start thinking of trade talks, right? Singapore has a deal with Taiwan. New Zealand has a deal with Taiwan. So we could think of a free trade agreement with Taiwan. That would be very significant, right? Taiwan, as you know, is a very important part of the global supply chains, and we could really use their help with some of our own manufacturing capabilities, right? Then we need to sort of emphasize on the fact that both of our nations are liberal democracies, right? So we could send our people to visit Taiwan, and Taiwan could send people to like visit our parliamentarians, right? So there could be a parliamentary association, right? So this is how we could emphasize the fact that we are both democratic regimes, right? Third, we need to have a long-term perspective, right? As I've hinted at earlier, right? The long-term perspective is important because our engagement with Taiwan up till now has been very episodic, right? And then like we need an exchange of ideas in the health sector, because Taiwan's containment of the virus was legendary, right? They weren't allowed to be on the WHO meeting and everything, but the experiences that were gained out of Taiwan were critical for the global health economy. And I think we could learn a lesson or two from Taiwan. So these are things that we could do right away, right? These are active things that are waiting to happen, right? Besides the more geopolitical way of thinking about how much of a partnership we want with Taiwan, this is something we can do right away, all right? So then let's move, and we're just going to revise this, all right? So 50 years of India-Bangladesh relations. The idea is not to cover the entire gamut of relations, but if you haven't prepared India Bangladesh and there's a question that turns up, your answer is going to be to sort of circulate around these points, right? So this is why we're doing it. There was a Bangladeshi contingent in the Republic Day parade. There is precedence for it. French troops have marched here, and then like troops from Oman did the same. All right, so this is just highlighting the fact that 50 years of our relationship have come to pass by, right? So let's quickly get into the history of India-Bangladesh relations. It was India's decisive military intervention in 1971 to 72 that pretty much led to Bangladesh becoming a country. Then we had an Indo-Bangladesh Treaty of Friendship, Cooperation and Peaceful Relations, also known as the Indira Mujib Treaty of 1972, right? Then what happened was Zia-ur-Rahman came to power in a coup, right? The Mujib was like sort of pushed aside and Zia-ur-Rahman came to power in a coup, and our relations plummet, right? Very bad phase. And then like that sort of mantle was just passed on to General Irshad, who ruled till 1990. He was the one who proposed SARC as a counterweight to the hegemonic country that is India, right? He said like each of us like Sri Lanka, Pakistan, Nepal, Bangladesh, Bhutan, we can't contain India like in isolation. We need to come form an entity, and all of us need to come together and keep India in check. That was the idea of General Irshad. Like SARC was that, right? Then what happened was Bangladesh Nationalist Party ruled from 1992 to 1996. Khalid Zia, like her manifesto used to be about standing up to India, right? In every election rally she would say, we will show India what we are and what not, all right? So our relationship from like the time Ziaur Rahman took over to the time when Khalid Zia was in power up till 1996, like they were bad, right? They were not great. Then came Sheikh Hasina of Awami League. Like Sheikh Hasina is related to Mujib, right? So she's from that faction, right? Which is a little more pro-India, right? So she has been ruling since, and relations have improved. In 2014, there was a survey done where 70% of Bangladeshis expressed a favorable opinion and perception of India. This is remarkable because during the Khalid Zia era, this wasn't the case, all right? So then, like, what are India's major objectives with Bangladesh? The first is to ensure connectivity with Northeast, right? We need to go there, right? Like Bangladesh is this big entity just standing between us and the Northeast, right? So we need to ensure this uncontested movement of people and goods through Bangladesh into the Northeast, right? That's very important to us. Then we need to ensure that Bangladesh does not become a launch pad for anti-India activities, including terrorism and insurgencies, right? Then we need to ensure that Bangladesh does not fall into the China axis, right? We want to ensure that there is very little China here, right? Then we need to check illegal immigrations, right? So every time we meet with Bangladesh or there is some negotiation going on, these are our objectives, right? And then what are Bangladesh's major objectives? They want to ensure that like they continue to get enough water from the rivers that flow through India into Bangladesh, right? Teesta, then Ganga Faraka barrage issue, right? So they want to ensure like flow of water remains like normal, right? Then they want to maintain an independent foreign policy. This has been their big strategic thing, and like so they every time they're not able to do something, they say it's because India is in our neighbor. We can't have an open and independent foreign policy, right? Then they need to ensure market access in India, right? They really trade with India a lot. A lot of like a big part of their economy is dependent on selling stuff to India. And they really want to fix the adverse trade balance, right? The problem that we have with China, it is just China exporting stuff to us and us not being able to export as much to China, right? $60 billion is a trade deficit with China. Bangladesh has a similar problem with India, right? Then connectivity is an important issue. Like you could look at the notes, right, and sort of just peruse stuff out of this, right? There is the Chilhati Haldibari railway corridor. We've opened 6 rail links that were suspended during the 1965 war, right? We have signed an agreement on coastal shipping in 2015 and an agreement to use the Chittagong Mongla ports for transshipment of goods to and from India. So you could see that connectivity is our primary obsession when it comes to Bangladesh, right? There is a we've sort of spoken of early operationalization of the Bangladesh, Bhutan, India, Nepal initiative, the BBIN initiative, motor vehicles agreement through expeditious signing of the enabling MOUs, although Bhutan has sort of walked out of it. So we want to operationalize this agreement with a provision for Bhutan joining later. This will just ensure that like goods sort of move seamlessly from like through these countries, right? Then Bangladesh, economic part of it is important. Bangladesh, as I've told you, is India's biggest trade partner in South India. India's exports to Bangladesh, and this is important, in financial year 2018-19 stood at 9.21 billions, and import was around 1.04 billion. So you could see the adverse trade balance. We sort of offset this through development assistance, right? So because there is an $8 billion trade deficit, so what we do is we give a lot of loan assistance to Bangladesh and sort of keep them happy about it, right? So Bangladesh is currently importing 1,160 megawatts of power from India, and this has really become one of the emerging pillars of our relationship with Bangladesh, right? Then we really partner with Bangladesh on multilateral forums, most important of which is being the Organization of Islamic Countries, where Bangladesh actually does most of the talking for India, right? Then we like if and when SARC becomes operational, we can now be sure that Bangladesh will be on our side, right? Then United Nations Security Council, Bangladesh has supported our proposals for reform, all right? And on BIMSTEC also, Bangladesh is our primary ally. So you could see how India and Bangladesh have started sort of like choreographing their international stance, right? Then Bangladesh thanked India for the SARC leaders video conference in March 2020, and for the SARC emergency response fund. And right, they recently also thanked India for the vaccine diplomacy, right? We sent a lot of vaccines to Bangladesh, right? Bangladesh will assume chairmanship of the Indian Ocean Rim Association in 2021, and they have requested our support for working towards greater maritime safety and security. So this is important, right? On multilateral forums around the world, we've been coordinating with Bangladesh. Now, this might seem like staple part of the relationship, but this is new, right? This is like the makings of like like some part of an Akhanda Bharat, right? Because we're coordinating on our foreign policy, right? This is what like close countries do, right? So this is important. Then as I've told you, there are multiple lines of credit running from India to Bangladesh to offset that adverse trade balance that Bangladesh is very sad about, right? So there are small development projects that are becoming major part of India's assistance, right? So the current president, right? She actually commended she commended India for its development assistance at the rural level, right? So that is important. Then China is Bangladesh's largest trading partner, by the way. China has flooded Bangladesh with foreign direct investment, lucrative infrastructure development projects, right? And 97% of Bangladeshi products have duty-free access to China, right? And then according to 2019 UN World Investment Report, Bangladesh recorded its highest ever FDI inflow in 2018, and 1/3 of the total FDI, right, was from China alone. So you could see China is like making a big splash in Bangladesh, right? China has also supplied its two regular submarines, right? And then like Belt and Road Initiative is just another thing, right? $31 billion in Bangladesh, which is infrastructure projects, second only to Pakistan. So Pakistan is getting $62 billion from China under Belt and Road Initiative. Bangladesh is a story which is often not highlighted as much, and it's $31 billion, almost as half, but still very significant, right? Right. Then Bangladesh has spent $2.5 billion on Chinese military hardware since 2010. So you could see how like China is a big factor in Bangladesh, and that's what we're afraid of. That's why we do vaccine diplomacy. That's why we do like development assistance. That's why there are lines of credit running from India to China, right? We are very conscious of ensuring that we stay on the good terms of Bangladesh, right? So the takeaway is that Bangladesh is rising, right? It will graduate from an LDC to a developing country. It has risen, right? And like this could fuel Indian industry, right? So its per capita income only last year became better than India, right? So this could help us, right? This could ensure that commercial transactions between India and Bangladesh become important. And connectivity will always be a force multiplier, not only on the economic side, but also on the strategic side, because we need direct access to Northeast, right? And we need Bangladeshi ports for everything, right? So we should leverage our proximity to Bangladesh, with Bangladesh as a counterweight to China, right? So even like China can do whatever it wants, it can invest as much as it wants, but we still surround Bangladesh on three sides, right? So that proximity with Bangladesh is a key factor, right? So I hope you sort of absorbed this, but keep an eye out for the Myanmar coup, right? So don't read anything and everything. India's stand on democracy has been under quite a lot of speculation, right? There was this British report from Chatham House that recently said that India is not going to like help promote democracy like we wanted to, right? So India's promotion of democracy has always been under the scanner, right? Do we really support democratic elements across the world, right? And we have said that, like, look at our track record in our neighborhood, right? So now that, well, military was always in power in Myanmar, right? They always had the power, but now that it's very overt, what would be India's stand? Watch out for that. Would India support Myanmar? But you understand how, like, we need Myanmar ports also for like shipment of goods. We need to ensure that our borders with Myanmar remain safe and sound. So it's going to be interesting what India decides, right? So the op-ed warriors are just beginning. So you sort of read these op-eds and figure out, like, what's going to happen and what's not going to happen. All right. So I hope you have a good day, and I hope you've paid sincere attention to whatever we've discussed today. You'll get these notes, and take care of yourself. Bye bye.